guys, it's Polly. This video is long overdue. Originally it was going to be a blog post, but in my coursework for my teaching certification, I have to make a few videos, and so I thought why not just double up and do this tutorial. It's more for art teachers than for students, but honestly I think I could use it for both. So with this project, this is something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. I think I first started seeing these beautiful light boxes on Pinterest in probably about, 2014, 2015. They're made by a pair of artists named Hari and Deepti, and they were inspired by their travels around Europe and then Asia, I think in particular Balinese shadow puppets. So we're using light to create this. Basically, you're building a box and you're just doing paper layers. You can see with the shadowy box over here, I don't have the lights on this one. I've created lots of different layers, mountains, trees. It's a really great way to teach your students about foreground, middle ground, background, because they're actually physically creating the different layers for that. It's also just a really neat project. I think it's a showstopper. I finally managed to do it with my 8th grade class this year. About half of them got finished before we had to go to distance learning. But the results were amazing. For whatever reason, iMovie's not letting me put photos in, but they created some really cool stuff inspired by books, by movies. So I'm a little bummed that we don't get to show these off at the art show this year, or they would have been a real showstopper, but it's definitely a project that I'd like to do again. I decided to go with an Avatar theme. I've been rewatching the cartoon since we are at home. And it's just a really sweet, really great show that I wanted to create a little bit of art for. The other one, the sample that I did for my students, is original art. So here's a little bit of a side view. You can see the light is kind of escaping around the back, around those edges. That is why in this other box over here, I've kind of built a frame around it as well. So there are 3 main parts to this project. There's the first part where you're just doing the sketches. You're breaking down your sketch into the different layers. There is the part where you cut out each individual layer. There's the part where you build your box, which is what this video is going to be about. And then there's the part where you can build a box around it just to make the whole thing look a little bit neater. Okay, so at this point I have created my sketch. I've identified all the different layers, the different areas that I needed to cut out. I have gone ahead and cut out all of my layers and stacked them up. A nice way to see if your layers are working is to put them together and hold them up to the light. You're going to get a similar effect to what you're going to end up with the light box. So at this point, I can set my sketch aside. I still want to use it for reference just to see what goes where. But what I need right now is my foam core. This is 4 by 6. And I need to go ahead because I want to put the lights on my foam core. I need to go ahead and make a tiny little opening, probably near the bottom. It's going to be wherever you want the cable to come out because this cable attaches to the battery box that turns the lights off and on. So I'm going to go ahead down near the bottom and just cut a little rectangle out. This is not great foam core, but it does the trick. Okay, so next I want to think about where I want my lights to be. It is good to encourage your students to have the lights turned on for at least part of this process, in part because you want to see where you should arrange your lights for the best effect. And then also, sometimes there are issues if you staple a little too close to a light, or if you staple and you clip the cable, it can break these lights. So we obviously don't want that. So just making sure that you are stapling in between the 2 staples on either side of the metal cord, that's going to really help this work. I did go ahead and I penciled in the moon just so that I would know where that light should be. I don't think I really want my lights behind the moon because I don't want it to look like there are stars in the moon. The lights sometimes have the tendency to look like little stars. So instead, I'm going to kind of just try to work around it. One thing that I will say too, try and leave a little bit of an edge. I'm not doing a very good job of that here because you will be gluing down your strips along these areas, so you don't really want a cord in between. So next step is starting with the glue. Now you want to make a bunch of really thin strips with your foam core. It doesn't really matter how thick you cut them, but we're going to lie them down flat rather than on end. For one part, it just glues a little more securely when it can glue onto that paper. And then for the other, if you glue them on end, they have to be exactly the same width, and that's pretty tricky to do. So I think it's just better to go ahead and layer them on like this. Make sure you fill it in all the way around, including over this little bottom part where you have the cutout, because that way no light is going to escape. That's especially important with your very first layer. So at this point, I have built up the walls of my box 2 deep on top of the back piece. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my diffusion layer down, just to kind of give the light that nice soft quality. If you do have something like stars in your image, you might want to leave some areas open. But for most scenes, you're just going to want to make this light a little softer. So I'm taking my blank sheet and just carefully putting it over all the edges. Now I'm using this really nice craft glue, and because printer paper is the only type of paper I have a lot of at home, that's what I'm using right now. If you use this craft glue with like 80-pound drawing paper, it's just going to work a lot better. You can see it's wrinkling around the edges. It's not going to do that so much with nice drawing paper. Now I'm ready to start adding my layers that have cutouts. My next layer is going to be the moon layer. Now, because the moon layer is pretty simple, I could do it either way. I think it's like a tiny little fraction to one side. So what I want to do, I want to check my layers that are going to come in front of it and see which way is going to look best. I've added my moon layer. You ready for this? So you can go ahead and switch it on to see how it's going to start looking, and you can already start to see how these different layers are going to end up kind of having different value, whether they're closer or farther away from the light. Once I build up the box, my next layer to go on is going to be this layer with all the detail with Appa and the kids. So I didn't want to glue it down using my craft bond. This is amazing glue, but it is making the printer paper wrinkly. So I experimented to see what else I have around the house. I've got this double-sided tape. I tested it on another sheet of paper, and it doesn't seem like it's going to create any issue with the light coming through. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that on this layer instead. Okay. Make sure everything is super lined up. And place it. Awesome. Cutting the very last few pieces, the little supports for the layers. Something good to note, just to let your kids know, foam core, especially the cheap stuff that we typically use in schools, is not always consistent throughout. So even if they're using a sharp knife, they're getting frustrated because areas are cutting unevenly. It may not be them, it may be the foam core, so just let them know that. What I would do though, I would look at both the sides, choose the smoother side, and have that on the interior, because that's what you're going to see. All right, let's go ahead, let's build this final layer. keep my fingers away from the edges to minimize smudging. So with the light box, I mean, this is the main section of the box right here where you build up the layers, but eventually you can also build a box around it that just keeps the light in a little bit better. It makes sure that it traps it in, and then also you can just glue a frame on the front, and that just makes everything look a little bit neater and really sets off your image. Here is the completed shadow box or light box. I decided to put in some stars in the background. That's pretty easy to go back and do. You just go in with a little pin, whether that's a thumbtack or a dressmaker's pin, and just poke little holes in the sky, and that can create some cool stars. I like how you can see when you move around the edges, just how the paper's layered, how there is some physical depth as well as visual, and so it's just a nice project for getting those different concepts across. So that's the process to create these cool light boxes. I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to the LED lights we used below. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with me on Twitter at Ms. B Mart. Thanks for watching.